Braves and baseball fans, it's time to take a trip from coast to coast across Major League Baseball.
There it goes, a long drive. If it stays fair, home run.
One strike away. Sandy into his windup. Here's the pitch. Swung on and missed a perfect game.
Fly ball deep left center. Grissom on the run. Yes! 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 The Atlanta Braves have given you a championship. Listen to this crowd.
Left side, Swanson to first. Braves, world champions.
Braves and baseball talk, straight from the diamond. Here's Grant McAuley.
Hello and welcome into From the Diamond. I am Grant McAuley, live from the Kia studios of Sports Radio 92.9 The Game in Midtown, wrapping up the weekend for the Atlanta Braves, rest of baseball, and I guess for everybody listening, because it is late on a Sunday evening, and the Braves are done with their homestand, done with the New York Mets for the 2025 season as well, and a lot of things we're going to parse through as we start to wrap up the month of August, and before you know it, we'll be wrapping up baseball season. The Braves lose 2 out of 3 to the Mets over the course of the weekend. That kind of put a stop to what had been a much better run for the Braves for the past couple of weeks, so they were able to right the ship and at least end the homestand on a winning note on Sunday, 4-3 over the Mets over at Truist Park. Some nice clutch hitting. Sean Murphy, good to see him kind of break out at the plate, come through with a big hit, and Jurickson Profar has kind of been one of those guys for the Braves here in the second half, and the Braves have had a few of those guys offensively, and it started to add up to a whole bunch of runs. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. It was, I think, long overdue to see the Braves offense get going. I've heard the phrase better late than never. I don't know that it makes me feel altogether too much better, but I would imagine for hitters that are going through it for the first 3 months of the season, it could help them feel a little bit better about 2025 in regards to how it may launch them into 2026. And we're not going to get too far ahead of ourselves and start previewing next season, but we are going to go back through the weekend. We are going to talk a little bit about how the Braves have been playing lately, a whole bunch of roster moves, and unfortunately, the fact that injury remains a huge story for this team. I hoped that we would leave it in 2024. Clearly, that was not the case. I know the Braves, more so than anybody, myself or Braves fans or anybody out there listening, probably hoped that they could leave that injury storyline in last season as well. But it has unfortunately continued to be a problem for this team. And the latest season-ending injury was announced this week as Austin Riley, the Braves' third baseman, had to undergo a core surgery procedure up in Philadelphia. Brian Snitker, when we talked to him this week, said it was a sports hernia deal that had to be addressed surgically. And obviously, with where we are on the calendar, that's going to end Austin Riley's season and the second straight year for him. And I'll get into this a little bit more later, but the disappointment for Austin certainly, I think, is kind of part and parcel to what the Braves have suffered through this year, individually and collectively, on the offensive side of things. So we'll kind of dig into that a little bit, but certainly disappointed for him in what has been a disappointing season that you just don't even get the opportunity to do the kind of thing that, say, Michael Harris is doing right now, which is swinging a hot bat and kind of saving his year. Not that Austin was down quite as bad as Michael was over that first 90 games. I mean, that was a rough run for Harris. There were a lot of question marks about Michael Harris and where he was going to be and what it was going to look like for him, just based on how bad that first 90 games was. But to his credit, he continued to grind it out. He figured some things out, and you just kind of hope everybody gets that opportunity. And Austin's just not going to get that this year. So I think that getting healthy, being ready, being full strength for the spring, that's what the Braves anticipate will be good for him. But like I said, just one of the many stories that we've had to talk about this year on the injury front, and it's just not a lot of fun. We got the final confirmation, I think, that Reynaldo and Lopez, Spencer Schwellenbach, both of those guys, based on the timing of where we are, they're not going to push them back into regular game action again this year. And that's unfortunate for both. But an opportunity for them, as they're trending in the right direction health-wise, to do a little bit of work on the mound. I'll get into that. I also had a chance to chat with Spencer Schwellenbach about his recovery from that fractured elbow. You'll hear that on today's show. And I chatted with a few other Braves who have just been kind of trying to plug in where they can and help this club out. Joey Wentz was one of those. I know he had a rough start against the Mets, but what a nice find he's been thus far. And the newest Brave to jump into rotation is Cal Quantrill. He made his Atlanta debut on Saturday, and I got a chance to talk to him a little bit about finding some work before the season is over. He's certainly going to try to show the Braves a little bit of something, and we'll see if he's able to just kind of cover some innings and whatnot. But I got to chat with him, super nice guy. And Jake Fraley they brought over from the Cincinnati Reds. He is also, I think, just kind of trying to show the Braves what he's capable of doing because they could potentially look for him as a fourth outfielder maybe next year. So a few different conversations I had with a few different Braves. You'll hear those on today's show. You will also hear my visit with Dan Hayes of The Athletic. I wanted to get into this last week, but hey, better late than never, right? We're going to talk about the Minnesota Twins. What in the world went on at the trade deadline and all of the will they, won't they of whether or not this club was going to be sold. I'll talk to Dan Hayes about that a little bit later in the show. That's what's coming up on From the Diamond. I'm Grant McAuley. This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
Back to more From the Diamond. From the Diamond, it's brought to you by Window Nation. Get 2 windows free with every 2 you buy and pay nothing for 2 years. Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. We're live from the Kia studios, closing out our weekend, and the month of August also ticking down as the Braves have just 30 games left in this season. 58 and 72 record now for the Braves. Excuse me, make that, 30 games. 30 games. Or is it 32 games? I need to get better at math. It's 32 games. That's the kind of stuff I try to prepare for before the show. Then I look at it and I'm like, that doesn't look right. But yeah, they're 58 and 72, which adds up to 130 games, which gives them 32 to go. And I don't want to shortchange them because goodness knows we've certainly been through it this year, and I think all 162 are probably on the docket for the Braves, so we'll find out at the end of the year. Could be 30, probably going to be 32, though. Now, with that settled, what exactly are the Braves going to be doing over the course of those next 32 games? We'll talk a lot about that as we go ahead, but what have they been doing recently more so is kind of what I wanted to get into. This weekend series with the New York Mets, you kind of wanted to see, I think, if you're the Braves, just the opportunity to continue to pile on the miseries of New York. As we were talking about on last week's show, the Mets are a club that, while they have been holding on to that final wild card spot, August has felt anything but an easy ride for the New York Mets. They have been losing series. They have been losing games. They have been imploding. The guys that they got to, I think, strengthen up their pitching staff some have not exactly performed. And there have been a lot of questions this year, even though I look at the stat line and it looks pretty good about Juan Soto. I was looking, because social media gives us so much that we can utilize in various different ways if you choose to. And Juan Soto, I saw some stat about how he was the only player in baseball with 100 walks and 30 homers and 20 steals so far this year. And I thought, man, that's a pretty good season. And he's got at least 32 games to go himself. And in all of the commentary underneath that was basically Mets fans saying, yeah, but what's his average with runners in scoring position? The guy's awful. Man, you're going to be paying this guy $760 million over the next decade? Well, enjoy that, I guess. But, yeah, Juan Soto, he's not awful. I can go ahead and tell you that. But the Mets have not been able to get enough. And it's not about one guy either. I mean, they've got some MVP caliber players who just haven't been able to put the team on their back and carry them because a lot of times it just doesn't work that way. But New York came out, and they trounced the Braves on Friday and did so again on Saturday. And then Sunday, Atlanta was able to keep it close. They got a decent pitching performance, I thought, from Bryce Elder, who has done this now twice to the Mets. And he's been on this like every other start is a good start, Bryce Elder thing, the Jekyll and Hyde, which I think we've come to know and expect in some ways just because it's going to be one of two outcomes. It very seldom is the one in between. Where it's like, you know what Bryce Elder did? He went out there and it was 6 innings of 3 earned runs. The quality start, by definition. It's usually 6 or 7 innings of 1 or 2 run ball or 3, 4, 5 innings of 7 or 8 run ball. And there's just not a lot of in between. But it was a good Bryce Elder on Sunday, can confirm. Made one mistake, gave up 1 home run. And other than that, pitched well. And the Braves offense able to fight their way back into it. And the Braves do take the season series of the New York Mets by an 8-5 final there. And I'm not telling you that that's anything that you need to hang a banner over, but I will tell you as far as what the Mets have been trying to do this year, the fact that they have lost the season series to a Braves club that has struggled as mightily as it has, a Braves club that is sitting 14 games under 500, it's certainly not helping out in the National League East race or in the wild card race either. And I know we talked about this last week, and I'll just kind of throw it out there quickly so that we can all move on. But if the Braves somehow had found a way to go what would amount to about 38-0 or 34-4, I think I might have said on last week's show, they'd be right back in this wild card race. They might even have one of those things. At this point, with 32 games to go, you pretty much have to play perfect baseball the rest of the way if you want to be a factor in that. Maybe a little less than. But you can make life more difficult, is my point, on some of the other teams that are trying to sew away those wild card spots. And the New York Mets were certainly one of them. The Braves, though, failing on the weekend to really be able to do some damage to New York. But a 12-9 month of August, I am looking at that as things have been put together thus far. It's August the 24th, The Braves are looking to put together just their second winning month of 2025. That's where we're at. And you might not be surprised by a club that's 14 games under 500 in the latter part of August not having a whole bunch of winning months. But the Braves, when it comes down to it, would like to close out the season better than it started. And the way that it started out was a 14-11 month of April, but it followed an 0-5 month of March. So we'll call the first month of the season really month plus 14-16. So if you really want to break this whole thing down, this would be the best month opportunity for the Braves as far as most wins they could get. But it's not going to be easy either. They're going to have to go on a road trip in which they're going to play 3 against the Miami Marlins, 4 against the Philadelphia Phillies, and then 3 more against the Chicago Cubs. So there's going to be some challenge ahead of them. 10-game road trip. I mean, those are not fun. I don't care how good your club is, especially when you roll into a city like Philadelphia that's, they're going to be all amped up, and the Phillies are in first place in the National League East. But, man, did they get some bad news this past, week or two. Zach Wheeler is going to be done for the year, it looks like, because of a blood clot issue and the fact that he's going to need thoracic outlet surgery or surgery to correct that. And we'll see what Zach Wheeler looks like on the other side of that. But that's an absolute shame. He's one of the best pitchers in the National League, if not all of baseball. And now the Phillies are going to have to figure out a way to go without him. Is Aaron Nola going to come back in and factor? I don't know. They do have Christopher Sanchez having a great year. They've got Ranger Suarez. I mean, they've got some other options. And you don't have to have 5 starters to make it through the playoffs, but it certainly helps to have your best horses. And they're not going to have one. In Zach Wheeler, their very best one. The lead horse, if you will, for that rotation. But when you look at what the Braves have been able to do thus far this month, it is at least a little bit encouraging, and it's pretty much built on the fact that the Braves offense has all of a sudden turned back into a very, very effective offense, a potent offense. And it's kind of hard to describe exactly how they did it or the expectation that they would do this, considering that Ronald Acuna Jr. was on the IL for a good chunk of this in the second half. And Austin Riley has been on the IL for a good chunk of the second half and is going to miss the rest of the season. And all of a sudden, the Braves, they came into Sunday with the 3rd most runs scored in Major League Baseball since the All-Star break, and that is no longer a small sample size. I mean, you look at the first half for the Atlanta Braves, it spanned 85 games. They just played their 35th of the second half. So a 35-game sample in which the Braves offense has looked a lot more like you would hope that the Braves offense could be. But they're doing it with Jerkson Profar setting the table at the top of the order. We'll talk more about him in a little while. And they're doing it with other guys plugged in. Nacho Alvarez has been hitting the ball well lately, and we'll talk a little bit about his opportunity with Austin Riley down. You're seeing more out of Michael Harris, obviously. Don't want to bury the lead there. He's having a great second half. You've got Ronald Acuna Jr. back out there. Drake Baldwin is putting together, I think, a season that could win him Rookie of the Year. And I think we've seen some signs at times from Ozzie Albies looking a little bit better. And then Matt Olson's just kind of just putting along here. Not a lot of power, though, from Matt Olson, and that's something that I think has been a little bit strange. He's hitting pretty well in the second half, but it's just been quiet from the slugging percentage perspective, and that was something that we had to talk about with Austin Riley because the slugging wasn't there. Even when he was out there every day, you weren't just seeing the power production that you expect, which usually turns into run production from him, and now you're not really seeing it from Matt Olson either. But regardless of whether or not those guys are putting up their career years and they're the guys that you kind of expect to be, leading this thing, the Braves offense has turned into a very, very impressive group that is able to score runs in bunches again. And if that wants to carry over into 2026, I don't think anybody's going to complain. Of course, the problem, now that the offense is going after it wasn't over the first 3 months of the year, is that the pitching is trying to figure out just any and everything at this point. The Braves are 29th in Major League Baseball in ERA. It's just under 6 coming into the day since the All-Star break. It's just not a good half, but we know the reasons for that. There's no Chris Sale. There's no Spencer Schwellenbach. There is no Reynaldo Lopez. There's no Grant Holmes. There's no A.J. Smith-Shawver. You get where I'm going with this. You lost your opening day rotation. And Spencer Strider, meanwhile, and we definitely have to get into this one as we go along, is going through, I think, the worst stretch, and not just I think, I know, going through the worst stretch of his big league career. It has been difficult to watch for Strider and difficult to figure out what exactly it is that's not working for him. And that led the Braves to decide that, hey, you know what? We're going to go ahead and skip the weekend start. See if we can get him a little bit of a mental, maybe a partly physical reset and get him back out there at some point on the road trip. The New York Mets did a number on him up at Citi Field a week ago. I don't think that they wanted to invite that possibility as Strider's still kind of trying to make adjustments and figure it out, and have a club that's like super familiar with him get an extra set of swings while he's kind of in what I would say is a bit of a vulnerable position or time, because he doesn't have a lot of answers, and his mistakes are getting hammered, and that has been an issue. Some other things going on for the Braves, of course, in this offense. What they're going to have to do for the rest of the year without Austin Riley in there, I think the answer is Nacho Alvarez. Riley is done for the season. That's a big blow for him, though. 3 straight 6-WAR seasons from 2021 to 2023. And, of course, we know he got the biggest contract in Braves franchise history in 2023. And really the last couple of years have been nothing short of a disappointment for him. And I know the Braves would like to get a little bit more on that return on investment that they put into him for that decade-long $200+ million contract that he signed. But some of these things have been out of his hands. The injury last year, a year ago, he got hit in the hand, broken hand, and it cost him the rest of his year. And just when he started to really seem to be swinging the bat well again. And that's the kind of injury that you wonder if it's going to linger and create more problems. But it was able to heal on its own. He didn't have to undergo the surgery. When I talked to Austin way back in spring training, he said that obviously is a good thing. You never want to have a surgery. And he did feel strong. But the power numbers and the consistency of those power numbers really never showed up in 2025. And then around July, last series before the All-Star break, this core muscle injury that he was dealing with, this lower abdominal issue, started to crop up. It landed him on the IL. He missed 8 games there, came back, played just, about a week and a half, and then right into that Speedway Classic and got in a foot race with Ellie De La Cruz and ultimately ended up back on the injured list because he strained that muscle yet again. Went up to Philadelphia, saw a specialist, and Brian Stuttgart did talk about this, and I'm sure we'll hear more from the team. We'll hear more from Austin Riley when he's made available to the media, which I'm assuming will be sometime in early September when the Braves get back. So they've got the 10-game road trip. You do the math. But ultimately, I expect to hear a little bit more about the detail of this. But a sports hernia is essentially what he's looking at having to have corrected here. Expected to be ready for spring training, though. That's good to see, but it does leave the Braves with 32 games to go to figure out what exactly to do at third base, and it's a great opportunity for Nacho Alvarez. And I know you heard my interview with Nacho Alvarez on the show about a month ago, right around the All-Star break, when he got that first opportunity coming out of the All-Star break. And I think he's looked much more comfortable. And that, I think, was the biggest thing that Nacho said was, I kind of know what to expect now, so it's not as overwhelming as, wow, everything is new, and it's the first time, and it's a major league, so you're going to have a set of nerves that's going to go with that regardless. And I think he is definitely starting to come into his own at the plate. He's been hitting extremely well here. 7-game hitting streak came to an end on Sunday, but he's pulled his batting average up to .253 on the season over this last 7-8 games after hitting just .197 over the first 19 games. So it might have seemed like maybe he was still a little bit overmatched, but all of a sudden, Nacho Alvarez with some multi-hit games and playing a really nice third base, by the way. And that's not a small thing either, because you do kind of wonder. I know that obviously Austin Riley's the answer at third base for the Braves, but is there a place where Nacho Alvarez could fit? Or can he be a guy that just proves that if you need me to play a little bit of third base when somebody's out, I can do that? I can also play a little bit of second. I don't think that the Braves are looking at him at the shortstop position, really, so maybe that kind of ends the discussion about being the super utility guy. But, stranger things have happened. You can start to add a little bit, add an extra mitt to that travel bag. Martin Prado did that. Yeah, Martin Prado could play second base, third base, first base, the outfield. Really, whatever you needed him to do, he could do it. You get a player like that, you develop a player like that in your system, that's a pretty nice little piece to add because you need guys. You need that depth, and the Braves have continued to show that, and they're not the only team across Major League Baseball that things go wrong over the course of a long season, and you got to have those quality players and that quality depth to step back in. One other nice little note as far as the injury front is concerned, because we had to go with the bad news of Austin Riley first. Chris Sale took care of business in his third rehab start for Gwinnett. 4 2/3 innings, 1 run, no walks, 5 strikeouts for him, 76 pitches as well. So got the pitch count up there, and we're expecting to see him during the 4-game series against the Phillies. I believe it's Saturday that Sale will be lined up to start. And that could give him the opportunity for at least 4, if not 5 more starts before the season is over. And as Chris Sale himself talked about when this whole process of throwing off the mound began again for him, these innings are meaningful. It can help him build that foundation to be ready to pitch again at a high level, make those 30 starts, push that 200 innings that he'd like to throw next year, because he hasn't been sitting around for the final 3 full months just kind of having questions in your head, mentally, physically, things that you aren't quite sure where you are when you come to spring training. You'd like to check those off the list, and that, I think, is something that Chris Sale's looking to do. So a little bit of good news amidst some of the not as great news going on for the Braves on the injury front. We got a lot more to get, though, to here on the show, and I've got quite a few interviews lined up for you to hear as well. Some conversations I had at Truist Park this week. We'll talk about some of the big hitting stories and pitching stories, and obviously looking ahead at what the rest of 2026 can be for the Atlanta Braves. It comes your way next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
Now, back to more From the Diamond. From the Diamond, it's brought to you by Window Nation. Get 2 windows free with every 2 you buy and pay nothing for 2 years. Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
This is From the Diamond. I am Grant McAuley, live from the Kia Studios with Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. As we continue on talking about some things going on with the Atlanta Braves for the week that was, and of course we'll be looking ahead to the 10-game road trip that is out in front of the Braves, but there were an awful lot of stories, many of them involving roster moves, and of course more than a few involving injury as well. Just before the break, I told you the good news is that Chris Sale is feeling good. He made 3 rehab starts for AAA Gwinnett, the most recent one coming on Saturday. He pitched into the 5th inning, got his pitch count up to 76, and so it's all systems go for Chris Sale, expected to be activated from the injured list and start next Saturday against the Philadelphia Phillies amidst that 4-game series. So that's some good news for the Braves rotation. You'd love to see Chris Sale healthy again, back out there. As I've talked about, it is meaningful for him to throw these innings, so that is a net positive. That's one box you can check for the Braves rotation that you wanted to actually check the return of a very important arm. But some bad news as well for the Braves. So not together all, unexpected and not altogether surprising either, considering where these two gentlemen are on their road. Spencer Schwellenbach and Reynaldo Lopez are not going to appear in regular season games again this season. And again, I don't think that that's a big surprise, just based on the fact they've been on the 60-day IL. They're just kind of working their way through throwing programs, and the season is ticking down with about 6 weeks left to go. There was just no way, I think, to responsibly, for them or the team, work them back into the picture this year. But now they can start to work towards maybe certain checkpoints to get them into the offseason feeling the way that they want to. And what kind of checkpoints would those be? Well, obviously, the throwing program is the first part of that. And I saw Spencer Schwellenbach throwing at Truist Park in the White Sox series. I believe it was on Tuesday. And it was great to see that. Excited to, see any kind of progress for him because he's a huge part of the Braves' rotational plans, not just this year, not just next year, but in the future. I mean, this is one of the bright young arms of, I think, all the National League, if not Major League Baseball. So hopefully he's able to get over what has been kind of a flukish, freakish, weird injury with that fractured elbow. So I had a chance to ask Spencer Schwellenbach a little bit about how that throwing went and where exactly he goes from here in regards to the rest of the season. Here's my visit with the Braves starter. Saw you out throwing the other day. Obviously, you want to make as many steps as you can to get back this year. How'd everything feel, and kind of what was that the first kind of action out there?
I've been throwing for 2 weeks now. Just got out to 90 feet. Everything feels great. As far as the throwing program, because I was out for 6 weeks, that means we got to do about a 6-week throwing program. So the hopes are to touch the mound at the end of the season. And just hopefully have a normal off season.
Yeah, Snit mentioned that you'd like to maybe throw a live BP or something that would at least end the season on a note in which you could carry some momentum into the winter and hopefully have that normal throwing program.
Yep. So when the season ends, I think we're gonna touch them out on maybe 1 or 2 live BPs and then kind of send it off and have a normal off season. And that's kind of the main thing that I want. I want to be healthy when the season ends and kind of go through my throwing progression in the offseason as normal.
How long did it take before any of the discomfort or pain that you were feeling started to subside, or was that kind of all tied to how much you exerted your elbow?
It took probably 3 or 4 weeks for it to start feeling better, and then had to do a bunch of strengthening stuff before we could start throwing, so that was kind of the why it took a little bit longer than expected with that.
I know you were kind of trying to put your finger on what exactly it might have been. Were you able to, over the last 6 or so weeks, kind of start to maybe even just rule things out that you feel like you could change moving forward?
Yeah, we still don't know exactly how it happened, but as far as my strength and range of motion and how I'm feeling, it feels back to normal. So we'll take some more looks at it in the off season to see if everything is fully healed. But as of right now, I feel like everything's fully healed. So that's kind of all we're worried about right now.
So it's certainly good to hear that from Spencer Schwellenbach. And again, he hadn't been around a ton. I know some folks were saying, hey, we haven't really heard much about him. Well, it's just kind of on that long road that didn't necessarily have all of the checkpoints set up yet. But the fact that he's been throwing for a couple of weeks, and as I watched him throw this past week, I mean, he looked comfortable. He was out to 90 feet like he talked about. And now it'll just be a lot of flat ground progression. And then eventually he does want to get on a mound and throw a live BP, which is similar to what Chris Sale did in that first real step before he went out on the rehab start. It's just along that road of letting you get into the winter and feel like, okay, I've completely rehabbed this injury. Let me continue to strengthen and let me be ready for spring training. That's really the goal for him. I saw Reynaldo Lopez doing the same thing. I believe it was on Friday doing some long toss. Again, you'd love to have seen him again this year. He's been out even longer. Remember, Reynaldo made a one start through exactly 5 innings this year and then had to get the shoulder surgery, the arthroscopic repair of the shoulder. No big structural damage, but just needed, I guess, a cleanup procedure. And you're not going to rush a shoulder injury. You're not going to rush any injury for a pitcher as far as surgeries are concerned. But, he is steadfast on wanting to come back and be a starter. I know there was some question about, okay, well, could he come back in relief this year? That could have been a possibility. But when he comes to spring training next year, Reynaldo Lopez still looking to be a part of the Braves rotation, and the Braves very much wanting, I'm sure, to get the return on investment of the multi-year deal that they signed him to be in that starting rotation and to pitch much like he did in 2024, which was an outstanding season for him, an all-star campaign. But outside of those couple of guys, there are some other arms that are trying to fill in, and some very big shoes, obviously. Reynaldo's an all-star. Spencer Schwellenbach, one of the better young pitchers in the National League. You've got Cy Young Award winner and Chris Sale, who's now on his way back finally. But some of the things that have been going right in rotation lately, well, let's start with Hurston Waldrop, because I don't know if anything has gone more right in the second half than him this side of Michael Harris. Let's put it that way. Waldrop continues to shine. He tossed a career-high 7 innings, 4 hits, no runs, a walk, and 7 strikeouts against the White Sox, and ran his record to 4-0 as the Braves picked up a 1-0 victory there. And this is a kid that is proving just how good he can be based on the adjustments that he has made over the course of the winter mechanically, and then the pitch and arsenal adjustments that he's been making in season. And think about this. He was not really throwing the sinker much, if at all, before Sean Murphy kind of recognized maybe you should throw that more. And that I thought was, okay, that's one thing that can help him out. But there were some questions, I think, about Waldrop's fastball when he came to the big leagues last year and just how competitive he could be with it. And was it a pitch that got enough movement that he could afford to make any mistakes? And look, you don't want to make a bunch of mistakes, but is it the most competitive version of the fastball? And apparently, according to what Waldrop said after that start against the White Sox, he is no longer throwing a 4-seam fastball. He is not throwing him at all. He is throwing a cut fastball, which he is using primarily as his fastball offering, which I thought was kind of fascinating. And it sounds like a thing that you would hear out of a 10-year veteran who's like, you know what, I made this change, and this is what I'm doing now. But Waldrop at, 23 years old, making a big change like this to his arsenal, very impressive. And I don't know that I've heard it too often, especially from a young pitcher. So whatever he's doing, it can continue to be the way that it is for him, because obviously it's working. Now, the rest of the Braves rotation, a mixed bag. We talked a little bit about Bryce Elder, kind of alternating the good and bad starts, and that's kind of who he's been. And Joey Wentz finally got hit around some by the Mets in the series opener on Friday. He allowed 6 earned runs in 3 1/3 innings. Eric Fetty came in after that and allowed another 6 earned runs, and he was promptly cut from the squad, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But Joey Wentz overall, I think, outside of this most recent outing against the Mets, and I know he got hit a little bit by the Brewers, but I didn't think it was altogether that bad. He's just done a lot. So I want to catch up with Joey Wentz and kind of get an idea of what exactly has been going right for him and how much he's enjoying kind of a second opportunity with the team that originally drafted him. So here's my conversation with Joey Wentz from Truist Park this week. Here with Joey Wentz, who's rejoined the club that drafted him way back in the day. I've talked a little bit to Brian Snitker, a couple other people, about the kind of the full circle journey that baseball can certainly be. What was the general response when you realized that you were going to have an opportunity to come back to the Braves, where you began your career in the system?
Yeah, it was really cool. It's been probably one of the cooler things with my career so far, getting to play for the team that drafted me and come back and be teammates with some of the guys here that I never was when I was in the system, but obviously I've watched from afar, admire their games, and it's just been really cool.
Yeah, this has been a team that has gone through a lot, obviously, this year. Injury has been part of that story. With those injuries, though, come opportunities and needs, as the case may be. And for you, the opportunity in the starting rotation. For the Braves, very much a need for people to cover some innings. You had been working in relief primarily, so what was it like getting stretched back out and reclaiming the role or regaining the role that you had to begin your career?
Yeah, I mean, I showed up in St. Louis in the bullpen and just kind of knew or assumed, like, hey, I'm here to, really pitch innings, and wherever I can do that, I've always just tried to be available and try to cover as many as I can. So went 3 out of the pen in St. Louis, then we had All-Star break and came back, and they called me and just said, hey, you're going to start against the Yankees, and still didn't know how many innings I was going to go, but just assumed I was going to, probably have a pitch count and try to reach it and try to throw the ball well. And since then, kind of made another start, and now feel really built up and feel like I have a good foundation, and just try to take the ball and go as deep every time as I can.
I know you've talked about throwing the ball, just executing all of those things, but there are those refinements that you do make from stop to stop, maybe start to start, appearance to appearance. What about your arsenal have you been able to kind of key in on that has maybe unlocked some success here as a starter with the Braves?
Yeah, I think just the first part is I've thrown to Murph and now Baldy, and just basically following those guys' leads and trusting those guys, and feel really comfortable as long as I execute my pitches. Better things will happen, and then just kind of in between starts in the bullpens, trying to stay on top of my mechanical cues, stay on top of kind of the zones that I want to be in, and feel good about those going into the game.
Were there some things about your arsenal that they were able to say, hey, pitch usage, whatever it may be, that could play up or that could help you? Because obviously in relief, maybe you're only facing a guy one time. When you're starting, you can face him 3 times if all goes right, maybe more.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit, but I think it's more just after my first couple, I talked to Kearney about ways to just get some more efficient outs, not just have it be, either a K or a deep A-B, and try to, get guys out and, 1, 2, 3 pitches. And those obviously really help you when you're looking to go deep. And then they also help you, avoid guys, 3, 4 times if you can, get some innings without using too many pitches. So that's kind of just where my focus has been, not trying to put too much pressure on myself, just kind of stay day to day, try to show up and get better and go from there.
Last one for you. You grew up in the Braves organization. Pitching is a big story, a big part of the heritage of this club. There are some really great starters on this team. Obviously, they're working their way back. Chris Sale, Spencer Schwellenbach, Spencer Strider's obviously in rotation as well. Are there things that you can learn from guys like that to kind of maybe just have a new wrinkle, something else that you could just be working on to constantly find that way, as Spencer likes to say, to get 1% better?
Yeah, I think, like you said, the history of the Braves can't really be said without some of the starting pitching that's been here, come through here, and getting to come here and be teammates with the guys that you said has been really cool. Obviously, Stride's back. In my opinion, he's handled coming back really well. He's thrown the ball well. And obviously, Sale is, for my generation, right up there with anybody in terms of being the best of the best. So, or so just some mindset stuff, being a starter, maneuverability, trying to get through your outings, the days you don't have your best stuff or your best command, and being able to still, hopefully don't turn those blow-up outings into short outings, but if you can still eat some innings along the way, that's kind of the role.
Yeah, a lot of different things you learn throughout the course of a season and the course of a career as well. Joey, thank you for your time. Appreciate it, and continued success.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That was Joey Wentz, Braves starting pitcher, who, if I told you back in spring training, Joey Wentz is going to be in the rotation in the month of August, well, you probably would have expected a few injuries to have hit the Braves, and that it did in fact happen. But the fact that he's been able to make the most of this opportunity, again, there haven't been a ton of stories that you look at this year and you're like, okay, well, that's definitely a net positive. But what he's been able to do in a very short amount of time, and going from a reliever and right into a rotation and kind of working his way up at the big league level, that's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but I feel like he's done a really, really nice job of it. In his time with the Braves, a 3.79 ERA, 8 outings, 7 of those starts. He's done a nice job of limiting the damage, only 2 home runs allowed, striking out nearly a batter per inning, and I think still kind of working to bring that control as far as the walks are concerned. But I loved kind of the approach that he's talking about, that not every at-bat has to be a long at-bat that ends in a strikeout. You can get efficient. You can start to get some ground balls. You can start to just work to weaknesses of hitters where maybe they're going to start to get themselves out, and that allows you to build up those innings, to go deep in games, and I think Joey Wentz has just done a really nice job of that. I know he had a rough one this weekend, but I'm fascinated to see over the next 5-6 weeks what he is able to continue to do with this opportunity. One of the good stories for the 2025 Braves. A lot more to get to, but we are going to turn our focus to something else happening across Major League Baseball when we come back. Dan Hayes of The Athletic is going to join to talk about what's going on with the Minnesota Twins, a club that was for sale, well, until they weren't. So how exactly did that happen? What exactly happened? I'll ask him next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
I love baseball. Now back to more Grant McAuley and From the Diamond on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game as we wrap up the weekend for the Atlanta Braves and take a look at what else has been happening across the world of baseball. And really, we got an interesting story, I guess, about a week, 10 days ago with the Minnesota Twins and everything that's going on with a club that had a fire sale at the trade deadline, seemed destined to be on the market for sale until they weren't. So to help me make sense of all that, I want to welcome Dan Hayes of The Athletic into the show. He joins me on the WadeFord.com hotline. Well, Dan, I know it's a crazy time of year. I think both of us would probably love to be talking about a pennant race, a playoff push, that kind of thing. But unfortunately for the Minnesota Twins and for the Atlanta Braves, for very different reasons, it's a very strange second half, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. You know, it started with the Twins where they came out of the All-Star break and they had Colorado and Washington on the schedule. And if they had come out of those two series winning 4 of 6, we'd probably be in a different spot right now than where they were. They instead lost 4 of 6 and basically decided to sell off at that point. I don't know. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people. Nobody can remember an instance where a team traded 10 players before the deadline, and they did that in 4 days. And then beyond that, the ownership group announced, you know, while we were in New York, which is like the place that Twins fans hate the most, maybe – just because the Yankees have dominated them so much over the years. And right before the third game of that series, ownership announced that it was pulling back the sale, that it had gotten a significant investment from minority owners, and that team control would stay in with the Pollad family, who's owned the team since 1984.
Yeah.
And basically that was the worst news possible. I mean, the deadline was a kick in the pants, essentially. 10 guys, Carlos Correa, Yohan Duran, a lot of popular guys went out with that. But then for ownership to kind of pull the rug, really, I think it's been a rough month for Twins fans. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And unfortunately, we're going to parse through some of those things. And let's start with the Pollad family, because Twins ownership has been in place for the better part of 4 decades. This conversation, though, about a potential sale has been brewing for a little while. So could you walk me through what seems to be a rug pull for the fan base, which has seemingly been waiting for clarity, if not change, as far as ownership's concerned?
Yeah, it's funny. This is the only team, male sports professional team in town, that has won a title. The Lynx have won 4 WNBA titles. There's a women's professional hockey team in its first year won one. But aside from that, no teams besides the Twins won a championship here. And the Pollad family, you would think that would be a reason for celebration. This team won the 87 and 91 World Series, but those memories are long gone. I mean, there was a threat to move in the mid-90s. There was the contraction threat. This team ran low payrolls forever. Those are the kinds of things that fan base thinks about now. The World Series memories are fuzzy or gone, or, half the group wasn't even born when they last won a World Series. So this is a fan base that's been looking for the exit from the Pollad family for a long time, and they thought they got it last October when the family said they were exploring a sale. In December, January, it looked like it was a real thing, like it was going to happen. Justin Ishbia, who his brother Matt is the controlling owner of the Phoenix Suns, and he plays a role in that as well. And so Justin was going to be the controlling partner of the Twins. But about a month after he started exploring it, the White Sox, who Justin is a 5% owner at the time, the White Sox said, hey, maybe you should talk to us instead. And Justin Ishbia lives in the Chicago area, and of course that's what he wants. I mean, look, when you look at the potential franchise value, the White Sox are currently valued at like $1.8 billion, but if the White Sox get a new stadium anywhere in the Chicagoland area, just basically get a new owner, I think that the potential for the value of the franchise is significantly more than what the Twins is. The Twins already have a great stadium. They're in downtown. They're about $1.7 billion is their estimated value right now. So just from a business standpoint alone, Justin Ishbia going to the White Sox makes sense, but it's just without question. I mean, look, he ruined the Twins essentially by going to a division rival. I mean, he potentially could wake a sleeping giant in the White Sox. And meanwhile, the Twins are hoping and just wishing for a guy like Ishbia who has a lot of, deep pockets and a will to win. That's what the Twins fans were looking for. And so basically 2 months after this sale starts or 3 months after it starts, you lose your leading contender. And from there, it just really never gained momentum. They couldn't find a kind of a anchor investor, and that's the lead guy or lead investor who probably buys about 30% of the team and has to have, significant capital. Something like a $500 million investment needs to be there. And they couldn't find that lead guy. They had plenty of minority investors or limited partnerships that wanted to do this. And a bunch of those groups were trying to work together, but they just never could pull off the financial wherewithal to get anywhere. And so after 10 months of exploring the sale, ownership group, got this sweetheart offer to come in. We still don't know who the investors are. We don't even know the amount they've invested. I've been told it's a significant investment. And the person facilitating the sale said this is unique because these two groups are coming in and putting in a significant amount. And my guess is it's anywhere from a third to 40% of the team that these two groups are combining to buy. They don't want power. They just want to invest. And that is not the case typically when people come in and buy. Usually when people come in and buy, they want a path to power and ownership and a voice. And they just want voices on the board. And I think it's going to be a 7-person board now with 2 new seats. So they'll have a voice, but ultimately the power still is in the hands of the Pohlad family. And for Twins fans, that's just terrible. They think of them as, penny pinching and every way you can say cheap, they have it down. It's not great for Twins fans who were hoping that they were going to have fresh voices in and deeper pockets with their ownership group.
Chatting with Dan Hayes of The Athletic. He joins me on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on the WadeFord.com hotline here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game as we try to figure out, and I guess it's going to take a while, what exactly went on with the Minnesota Twins, not just in recent years or even recent decades as far as the Pohlad family is concerned, but the big fire sale that they had that I definitely want to talk about that. I would be remiss not to mention as a kid who grew up watching the Braves on TBS at the 1991 World Series, I haven't forgotten it, and it's a very unfortunate, turn of affairs for Twins fans if, in fact, they have, because, those are the kind of memories that you want to at least feel like are possible. And clearly, with the Minnesota Twins situation over the past, let's call it 30-plus years, it has been very challenging, but there have been some very good teams, some very good players, and I think the opportunity has been there. The road through the New York Yankees, that may be a wall that they're going to have to knock down at some point, but putting all of that aside, I mean, there have been some moments, some cause for optimism, but to see this possible ownership change not come to fruition for Twins fans has to be an incredibly difficult chapter and some uncertainty there. But once you do figure out some of the ownership, the new infusion of money and investment that comes with it, perhaps there will be a renaissance, if you will, for the Twins. But you have to kind of look at what just happened, and that's a fire sale that went down at the trade deadline. And pardon me if I'm misinterpreting this here, but this is the kind of thing that we see teams do in order to trim down their operational costs for a potential sale. Now there is no quote-unquote sale, so how difficult is it for Twins fans right now to stomach what's never particularly fun, and that's tearing a team down to the studs and seeing popular players traded away?
Yeah, it is. And it's funny, you kind of encapsulated all of it really well there, because there have been great moments over the years. I mean, the group that they trot out every year for their Hall of Fame is just the position players that this franchise has boasted, not so much pitching, but position player side over the years is just loaded with real Hall of Famers. Mm-hmm. It's an incredible group. There's a lot of great history, and it is unfortunate that it's kind of getting weighed down right now. The one thing that I think that the front office and ownership agreed was they were probably operating at way too high of a cost that was out of their control at this point. They were not. They're having gone through the sale now. I know that the team lost money even when it won the division in 2023 and lost a lot of money. Mm-hmm. They had a record high payroll that year. Fans, whatever reason, the team didn't resonate because last year, and I will say after they had their playoff success in 2023, they cut payroll by $30 million. Nobody does that.
Ooh.
And the fans responded appropriately. And instead of getting an increase, we typically always see increases at the gate the year after a team wins a division with anticipation of another good, successful season. And they drew fewer fans in 2024 as a result of cutting payroll. And then this year is going to be a record low for Target Field. It's on pace for probably below 1.8 million fans, which, this is a place that drew 3 million fans twice in a row when it opened in 2009 and 2010. And so it's clearly going the wrong way. And I think what they did was look at the fact that their payroll was probably too high for what their business is doing right now. They figure they need a fresh start. Even though they ripped this down to the studs, there still is some really interesting talent here. And honestly, I could see this team potentially winning. It sounds weird to say, I can see this team winning 80 games next year. But for a team that traded 10 players away, I don't think people expect them to do much. But there's a chance, and I think there's a good chance that they continue forward with Joe Ryan and Pablo Lopez. Both guys have 2 years left on their contract.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we see them trade them. I think they know that they dug so deep that if they want any interest in this team, they better hang on to them going forward. And so you have Pablo Lopez, you have Joe Ryan, you have Bailey Ober in your rotation who's finally starting to look like himself again. And beyond that, you have 3 guys that were already in place that they really like: David Festa, Simeon Woods-Richardson, and Zebby Matthews. And so, you throw in 2 or 3 pitching prospects who are all at AA or higher. They feel like they have a really good rotation right now. And they still have Byron Buxton. They have Luke Keyshaw, who's been a rookie, who's come up and has been on fire, hitting 340. There's still a lot of talent, but it's, I think they're going to have to figure out some things, but it's going to be an affordable roster, which fans are going to hate hearing. But I could see them operating at like 110 million next year, 100 million, and still fielding a team that's capable of winning 80 games. And I think they want to start fresh and build this team up. And then hopefully fans resonate. They're talking about playing a little more like the Rays or the Milwaukee Brewers, where there's a lot of athletes on the field. They play with pitching and defense, and try to have a team that's capable of winning games in a number of ways. And, it basically screams cheap, but at the same time, there is a lot of evidence that the way they were going, trying to hit home runs, this team was so boring the last couple of years. They weren't doing what they were supposed to, and it really became predictable. And when injuries happen, awful. So they had to change something, and this is the way they chose to go.
Well, there is a precedent for the style of running a team that you're talking about. Clearly, the Milwaukee Brewers have tapped into something, no pun intended, that's working out pretty well in 2025. And anytime you think about just overlooking the Rays or feeling like, well, maybe they just are going to start their decline, they seem to find a way to reload and find value in places where I've joked about this over the years. If the Rays call you interested in a player, maybe you should not trade them that player, just based on their track record. But let me ask you about one particular guy before we get out of here who did not get traded in that fire sale. You brought his name up briefly, Byron Buxton. I'm curious about his situation. He is, of course, supremely talented, oft injured, though, and he was not dealt away. He does have the ability to veto a trade, and there was at least some interest rumored in a number of different clubs, including here in Atlanta, because he is a Georgia native. Do you think this trade conversation around Buxton is something we'll hear more of this winter, regardless of where the destination is, but just the possibility that he could eventually be on the move?
Basically, the Twins are telling everybody you can call his agent and find out, but he's going to say no. So I don't think that there will be any traction on this. Because, look, if there was a team that was going to draw his interest, Baxley, Georgia is where he's from. I've been there. It's 3.5 hours southeast of Atlanta. It is way down there. And, he loves the Braves. He always grew up a Braves guy, and he loves Minnesota. Minnesota is his home. And he basically was hearing from teams early in July, sort of like tampering, essentially. Teams went around the Twins front office just to see if there'd be even a reason to reach out. Huh. And his agent said no. And I asked Byron specifically, was that a message for teams? Because at the All-Star break, he basically came out and said, I know where I'm going to be. Minnesota is home. I have a no-trade clause. I'm not going anywhere. And I asked him, I was like, look, was that a message for teams going into the deadline? And he said, correct. And he basically said, where he comes from, your word means everything. And that he's a Twin. He likes the direction. He wants a team. He wants to be part of a team, sort of like what they're talking about doing, where it's aggressive on the bases, pushing it all the time, athletes, teams that don't just rely on home runs. I think everybody's pretty much sick of seeing the Twins waiting around for the big hit. So he's here. And look, the no trade is through 2026. After that, the last 2 years of his contract, he's allowed to restrict trades to 5 teams. But the thing that the Twins realize is that Byron Buxton is their guy and really wants to be here. I think he's one of those guys that's, even though there's a lot of frustration because of the injuries, always resonated with fans. They love his style of play. He'd run through a wall for the organization, and he's done it literally a handful of times to his own detriment. Like, he's their guy. And I think that as much as that appeal is out there, it would be a very difficult move for the Twins to make, just because it would, be another hit for the fan base. So I think he's here. As much as going home sounded awesome, he's committed. So it was very interesting to see. But again, he really, truly has found a home in Minnesota. I think he'd like to finish his career there.
Sounds like a throwback kind of player on the field with how he plays and, of course, how he looks to do his business and wanting to play for the team that he knows, the team that he's grown up with, and the team that he is hoping will find some more success over the course of his time there, however long that may be. Dan, I appreciate all of your time. I know this has been a very strange ride. It may not be over yet as far as what's going on with the Minnesota Twins, but appreciate all of the insights you're able to share with us and look forward to catching up with you again down the line.
All right. Thanks a lot, Grant. Appreciate it.
All right. When we come back, much more Braves and Major League Baseball to talk about right here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Now, more From the Diamond with Grant McAuley. Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate. 855-299-SOLD on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. We're wrapping up this edition of the show, wrapping up the weekend as well. Got a little bit of a late start, but hopefully you've enjoyed all the baseball conversations we're having, as we do on From the Diamond. We'll be bouncing around a little bit with football season getting underway, but don't worry. We'll still have your Braves and baseball talk right here on 92.9 The Game, running all the way through the month of September. Wish it was longer, but unfortunately this season did not cooperate quite the same. But you can always find From the Diamond wherever you get your podcast. Please subscribe there. Leave a rating if you'd be so kind. And you can find the show on the Odyssey app. So lots of ways to connect. You can also find me on social media at Grant McAuley on most platforms. Always love talking baseball, new and old, with you. And I'm also working on a few things for the social media side for a little something I like to call Wax Pack Wednesday. I don't know if I'm going to just contain it to Wednesday, but I'm going to open some old baseball cards. You can look at that, or look for that, rather, on my Instagram. I'm at Grant McAuley right there as well. So with all that shameless plugging out of the way, let's get back to our baseball conversations. Do have a couple of more of the combos that I got to have at Truist Park with a couple of Braves players coming up, but a few different things looking at what have been some good recent trends for the Braves. And I talked about the offense. The Braves offense has been one of the most potent in all of Major League Baseball in the last 30-plus games since the All-Star break. It's a very encouraging sign for a group that, let's face it, from basically the middle of May 2024 all the way through the All-Star break of this year, you kind of wondered, is this Braves offense ever going to find its way back to being able to score runs in bunches, or is this always going to be a group that kind of underperforms? And look, it doesn't always have to be on the ends of the extremes, and we're not always dealing in absolutes because we know what happens when we do that. But it has been very encouraging. And one of the things that I think has been at least fueling part of the Braves' resurgence has been the play of Jurickson Profar. Now, I was quick to point out, that guy had a lot to make up for based on what happened in the first half of the season, that 80-game PED suspension. Obviously, I know he wasn't planning for that, but it really put the Braves in a bad way. And their one big offseason acquisition got taken off the board about a week into the season, less than that. And then this club continued to struggle, offensively speaking. They didn't have Ronald Acuna Jr. back. He was supposed to be part of the solution there, not part of the problem. So you get all that. And I say all that to say, credit where it's due for Jurickson Profar turning his season around and really contributing to the Braves in a meaningful way that doesn't leave you to wonder quite as much, okay, well, that career year in 2024, is he going to be able to be that player again? He showed lately that, yeah, he can still be a very productive player, putting together a nice finish to his season that just didn't start out well, I guess is my point. He's batting .298 in August. He's got 7 homers and 23 runs knocked in 22 games, an OPS over 1,000, and he's drawn 18 walks. So he's on basing at about a 400 clip. And I've talked about this and will continue to. I don't think he's the guy at leadoff moving forward. I think that guy is batting third right now and will be back there next year. but it's good to see that production. Ronald Acuna Jr., meanwhile, since coming back to the lineup, is hitting .294, scored 6 runs, knocked in 4 more in his 9 games back. Still looking for some of that power, but good to see Ronald running nice and easy. He stole a base as well, so some very, I think, encouraging things were certainly going on there. The Braves, though, did a lot of roster shuffling this week. I don't know if we've got enough time in the remainder of the show for me to go to every single move that they made, but they had to put Luke Williams on the injured list, and we're looking for somebody to add, I think, a little bit of versatility to what is going on the Braves bench, which admittedly is typically not a lot. But I think they found a very nice and very versatile piece in Jake Fraley, a guy who has been, I think, the 4th, 5th outfielder for the Reds for a number of years and is capable of doing a lot of little things very well. So I had a chance to catch up with Jake Fraley, talk to him about coming over to the Braves, about just catching on to play a little bit more baseball here in 2025, and we'll see what's ahead beyond that. But here's my conversation with Jake Fraley. What's this been like for you, the opportunity to find a new place to play before the year's over? Obviously, the Braves have kind of been through it this year, trying to just field 26 guys, so it's a good opportunity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm excited. I mean, I've spent a handful of years playing against these guys, and obviously, the wide thought around the league is just how great they are here. The team that they obviously throw out there every year is extremely competitive, and I've heard nothing but great things. So being able to see it on this side now has been exactly that. So it's been exciting, and it's been good meeting all the guys, and it's a great opportunity. I get to be around some really good outfielders here, so I'm just trying to soak it all in.
I don't know if I'm informed correctly, but did you have a little bit of an injury scare towards the end of the tenure with the Reds, and how is that?
Yeah, no, it's fine. I had a play in left field that I slipped. I don't know, a foot hit a clunk of grass, and it just gave out, and I hyperextended my knee, so it's feeling fine. It's a little bit sore, but I had those days leading up to everything happening to give it some rest, so it's been good.
For Braves fans that may have only seen you play on the other side, how would you describe your game? It seems like there are a lot of different things that you do well, kind of blending it all together.
Yeah. I'm a guy that's I can do whatever's asked of me. I can play any 3 positions out there. I can hit in the top of the lineup, the middle, the back end, whatever's asked. And I'm a guy that, draws a lot of walks, get on base a lot, swing the bat pretty well, defend, got a good arm. So, I'm excited for whatever opportunity I get here.
Any of these guys that you're familiar with, that you played with? I didn't get a chance to play the roster connection with that.
Yeah, I haven't played with anybody here. The only guy, which I believe he got optioned yesterday, was Dane Dunning. I actually roomed with him years and years ago in the Cape. Yeah. But outside of that, it's just a bunch of guys I've played against for a lot of years now. So just, I've been able to have conversations with a handful of these guys when we do play against each other over the years. So, first time playing with pretty much everybody in here, unless I'm missing somebody.
All right. Well, thank you for the time. I appreciate it. Good luck and on this fresh start.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That was Jake Fraley, who was picked up by the Braves this week after being cut by the Cincinnati Reds. And he did mention he had roomed with Dane Dunning way back in the day in the Cape League. He ended up with Dane Dunning's locker after Dane Dunning was sent to the minor league. So there's some useless trivia for you there as well. But good to see the Braves, I think, taking a chance on somebody that could factor into the 26-man roster, at least a discussion beyond 2025 as well. Now, they've had to do a lot of this on the rotational side, unfortunately, because of the injuries that we've talked about to Chris Sale, Spencer Schwellenbach, Reynaldo Lopez, Grant Holmes, and, of course, A.J. Smith-Shawver as well, all of whom on the 60-day IL. And the only one of those guys coming back this year is going to be Chris Sale, who should get a start on Saturday against the Philadelphia Phillies as part of that 4-game series amidst a 10-game road trip. But an interesting move that was made by the Braves, or decision that was made, was to bump Spencer Strider back in rotation, to skip this outing against the Mets, with whom he was intimately familiar from a very bad start at Citi Field last time out. And they're going to push him back to the opener on Monday against the Miami Marlins. And you can certainly understand why. The last few outings for Strider, a complete struggle. 11 2/3 innings, 29 hits, 20 earned runs, 7 home runs, 4 walks, and 10 strikeouts. And I think the question most people are asking, I think it's including Spencer Strider to some extent, is what exactly happened here? He was showing some of his best average fastball velocity over this stretch as well, but the fastball just not living at the top of the zone the way that it had been in the past. The slider, meanwhile, mistakes were being made on that pitch, and I think that with some, inconsistency in that fastball, you're able to key in a little bit more on the slider if you're an opposing hitter, and when it's not as biting as it has been in the past, you can kind of see the results, the 7 home runs most certainly. So what adjustments can Spencer Strider make over the final month or so of the season, however many starts he has left this year, that can get him into the winter feeling healthy, feeling like he pitched as many innings as possible to get himself ready for a healthy offseason of getting stronger and being ready for next year. That's one of the questions I think the Braves are asking. But they've had to ask themselves too many times, how do we cover these innings? And one of the answers, it looks like, is going to be Quantrill, who was added over the weekend after being cut loose by the Miami Marlins. So another waiver claim for the Braves. Did have some cramping issues in his legs that shortened his first start with the Braves, but I think it could at least be an innings eater for Atlanta. From May through July, a 3.55 ERA in 15 starts. It's been a bad August for him, but he has at least been effective this year. So I got a chance to catch up with Quantrill, who joined the club this week and could be a part of the Braves rotation, at least for the next little while. Here's my conversation with him.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm excited. Staying in division, so I've seen these guys a little bit and playing great ball lately. So definitely an older, more veteran team than I was on, which is cool. Get to see some guys I've played against here for the last 5-6 years. And I think it's a solid squad. The last, or at least since the All-Star break.
Your season, I know, kind of started a little bit slowly, but it seemed like you really kind of got into a roll for about 2.5 months and kind of maybe ran into some speed bumps here in August. Is there anything in particular that you can put your finger on or anything you're trying to get back to?
No, it's been kind of a weird year, right? I don't think the numbers really tell the whole story. 90% of the time I've gone out there, I think I've pitched really well. Actually, some of the best I've thrown in my entire career. It's just the bad ones have been really tough this year, and it's kind of it's blown up the numbers a little bit. But I'm confident. I know that what I've got this year is as good as I've ever had, and kind of on to the next one. It's you can look back and you can be angry about a start or two, but like I said, on the whole, I think I've thrown the ball well, and I'll take that into this last month and a half and see if we can't finish the way we want to.
And it seems like that's something the Braves recognized, in addition to having a need to cover these innings over the final, 5-6 weeks, a chance for yourself to maybe just reestablish and put up some numbers that maybe are a little bit more indicative of how you've been feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as competitors, we always want the numbers to say what we want them to say. You believe front offices, they'll see through some of the nonsense, but for me personally, it's more just about getting back to, what's gotten me to this point in my career, which is throwing a ton of innings, going deep in ball games, and getting to that 100-pitch count and giving the team a chance to win. And, I think I'm still very capable of that, and hopefully that's why they've got me here.
I guess kind of nice to not have to wait too terribly long between your last start and your next start as well, kind of landing on your feet here.
Yeah. Didn't want to interrupt whatever schedule they had going here, but I'm glad that it worked out that I can get out there before it's too many days. At this point in the season, you don't really want to go 8-9 days between a start. So this is good. I feel fresh and very prepared.
Well, the Braves would certainly like to get whatever they can out of Quantrill. Then this may be one of the many cases of just trying to get whatever innings that you can get from all of these guys that they've been claiming and throwing in to fill this rotation, which has been under siege because of all the injuries this year. But an interesting veteran arm who had some success in Cleveland and maybe can lend a little bit of that and maybe find a little bit of the consistency that he had throughout the course of the summer for the Miami Marlins. But that's what's going on with the Atlanta Braves rotation, is questions asked and not always necessarily answered, but some new faces rolling in to try to help out with that. Coming up is a 10-game road trip for the Braves. It's going to start out in Miami. It's 3 games there. Your starters for that series, I mentioned it's going to be Spencer Strider. He will face Edward Cabrera on Monday. Then it's Hurston Waldrop against Sandy Alcantara. You talk about getting a big-time test right there. I know Sandy's had a rough year, but for Hurston Waldrop, who's 4-0 on the season, can he keep it rolling as he faces the Marlins and a former Cy Young Award winner? And then Joey Wentz will look to get back on track as he faces Ryan Gusto. That is the finale on Wednesday afternoon. Then it's 4 games against the Phillies, 3 games against the Cubs on the other side of that. The Braves pitching staff, meanwhile, I do want to make sure I throw this out there because it's going to affect how this bullpen is utilized. Lost one of their more useful arms this year, or at least one of their busiest, and that's Aaron Bummer. He landed on the IL over the weekend with left shoulder inflammation. He's 3-2 this year, a 3.81 ERA in 42 games, and has kind of been that Swiss Army knife in the bullpen. So hopefully some rest will get him back sooner than later, but just yet another hurdle for this pitching staff to try to clear. And it's just seemed to be one thing after the other after the other. But the games are ticking down for the Braves as they have just 32 remaining after Sunday and losing 2 out of 3 to the New York Mets. But this 10-game road trip will be, I think, a pretty big test for a Braves club that's played some better baseball in the second half, that is looking to close out the month of August at least with a winning record. They have played better. They've scored more runs. It's been the pitching that's been a huge problem because you've got a 6 ERA as a staff over that same stretch that you've been scoring all those runs. That's going to wrap it up, though, for this edition of the show. I want to thank all of my guests on this one. Dan Hayes of The Athletic for breaking down things going on with the Minnesota Twins. Also, Spencer Schwellenbach, Joey Wentz, Jake Fraley, and Cal Quantrill for carving out some time for me. And thanks to my producer, Josh, as always, for taking good care of me on the other side of the glass. And I'll look forward to catching up with all of you guys next week. It'll be a Sunday evening affair for us. This has been From the Diamond. I'm Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app. And until next time, so long, everyone.